So good afternoon, all. We're looking at the traditional water harvesting systems today, and essentially these are, I mean, something that we need to understand from what we look at today is basically that all of them are set in a certain context and a certain level of water that is available, and that's why each of these have been designed as ways of tapping that or kind of using the excess that would be available in that particular context. So what we're looking at is, we've just classified it into three broad possibilities, but there are there are various iterations to these as well. So essentially, what we're looking at as the Ahar Pines is from the floodplains of Bihar, and that's talking about an excess water condition where you have um, you know, um, uh, when the rivers swell, you have more water, and how does that water then be tapped into many other uses that would be can be taken forward in that particular landscape. Then we're looking at the tanka, which is essentially a type of a tank which is created in a more arid region to tap into the only source of water that they get once a year. And then you're looking at various step wells or the bowlies or the vows, which I'm sure that all of us have visited at least one in across this very landscape of India, where it's essentially what you have is your masonry or built structure around, and the bottom of it is going to be open, and depending on what is the requirement that you're building this for and what is the idea behind building this particular tank, the depth and the various other built aspects of it will change. So essentially these were developed to collect or concentrate or store water from your roof runoffs or the surface runoffs, and then eventually were used through the year, or they would be used for any of the throughout the year, or any of the particular uses that you would have in a certain settlement. And also some of them were used to create a certain microclimate to reduce temperatures around the structures that you were building them in. So if we were to look at the ahars in Bihar now, just to understand what the context was and why they were built in a certain way. Now Bihar, because it's just off the Ganga, it comes across from a river which is usually overflowing during the monsoons, and this excess water then can be tapped into and be used for various purposes. And if that was not tapped into, it would just be wastewater, that's going to run off, and then you're not kind of using it for anything, and that you kind of just let that additional amount of water go. So what was done was that there were a lot of these earthen bund walls that were built. There were some of them were also brick sometimes, to kind of channel your main water that you have into smaller channels which kind of run through your agriculture plots or cultivation areas, so that that water can be used for your plantation purposes, so that your agricultural plots are thriving when you're in a water like high water table condition. Another thing that is important to understand here is that your soil condition has its own important aspect to play in it. And essentially in the Bihar landscape, the sand content in the soil is very large. So when that happens, the percolation into the soil is very low. And essentially your groundwater recharge is not going to be much. So it makes sense to actually use that water and run it into areas that you will kind of let them into and irrigate your landscape. So that's how this whole idea of kind of creating smaller channels from the larger water body came in, and that's what you call as your ahars in Bihar. And that's the traditional system that has been used, and now there might be many iterations to it, but that's how the idea kind of came along. So these are just a few photographs of how the mud buns. Some of them are brick structures as well. But basically, with depending on where you give your openings in the bunds as well, it will it will allow you to let the water from one plot to another accordingly. So that's essentially what we're looking at in terms of an ahar, and this is essentially what you're looking at in a flood condition or a large water situation. Now if we were to talk about an arid landscape, uh, uh, actually, Kima, should I stop here, and anything that should be added to the first part of it?
Yeah, I was just thinking that
Yeah.
actually the ahar is on the similar lines of like holding ponds or your, retention ponds, which are a newer concept. Like that's the way people talk about whenever they are dealing with rivers or streams, and they call it as a holding pond where holds the water. And as Swati rightly said, the insertions at which are the cutouts at the level of the bund will decide how much water will overflow into the next plot. And then you retain the soil. The principle is similar, that you moisten the soil and make it much more fertile for the agriculture purposes. Any questions regarding the ahar system? I think Swati, let's continue.
Okay. So now we're looking at a tanka, which is essentially something that is built in the arid landscape. So your only source of water in a desert landscape would be whatever rainwater you're able to tap into, and that you would probably want to keep for throughout the year and use it for your domestic purposes as well as drinking water. And this is a very interesting tank and a very interesting section actually. So this uh, yeah, so basically what you do is that you are tapping into your roof runoff and the surface runoff, and that's taken into this tank and stored through the year. Usually it's built in masonry. It's a built masonry cylindrical structure, and we'll have some openings which will let the water in, and there will be some kind of lime plaster which is done on all sides so that the tank is maintained through the year. They would probably also clean it once before the monsoon so that the cleanliness of the tank is maintained and the water remains clean throughout the year, as well as they probably also add alum and potassium permanganate today maybe also to clean the water and to make sure that there's no other microbial activity which is not good for the water to contaminate the water, is prevented. And um, and essentially what you have is that there is a lid on top which will allow you to kind of pull the water out and use it at whatever point. But the interesting part of this structure is also this portion. So today what we call as silt traps, which we try and include just before any tank, if it's going to be used for potable water, etc., where there will always be something called something like a silt trap, which will make sure that the water is cleaned of any of these oils or any kind of any particles that have been collected on the way. Now this is an older method where it allows the water to enter, and it's going through many of these walls. And what will essentially happen is that the silt will probably be also held back here, and then only the clean water, devoid of most of these particles, will go in. If you also notice, there is this kind of a jali or a mesh which will be there at the entrance to make sure that none of the larger particles or anything that the water carries with it enters this tank. So yeah, so I mean, these would be across the Rajasthan landscape, and they will kind of help in providing water to the closer settlements that are present. So this is essentially what you look at in the section, and you will have a cover with some kind of opening so that there's no foul odor that is maintained within the tank. This is like we saw there was a silt catcher. There is basically this tank is a closed bottom tank, and it's also closed at the top because you are kind of building it in a very hot region, you do not want the evaporation to happen, nor do you want to lose any of the water into the ground as such. So you want to maintain this as a proper solid tank through the year. And that's what it is. And then you kind of I mean, this image was just something because I wanted to show this clearly, that there is a mesh here and the levels of these things. So basically your water kind of enters, and only when it rises would it kind of enter your um, main tank. Sorry. So that's essentially the section of the tanka. Anything that we you'd like to discuss?
Shravan is asking the size of the tanka. What should be the diameter?
Uh, I think it differs depending on what kind of capacity you're building at. But I think it can go up to, I mean, it can be about 2 meters to begin with. No?
Yeah.
I think it's around that much, but it can also increase. There are much larger ones also that I have come across. I mean, I've known of.
Yeah.
Is that right, Kima?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So 2 meters, and then you'd also need to account for, so 2 meters in diameter, that's 1 meter radius, and then on one side we'd have the silt catchers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And
like in this image, you see there are multiple entries. Okay, so there are multiple entries. So there are 3 silt catchers here.
right, right.
Also, the tank right now, what Swati was showing is much more larger than the ones that you're seeing onto your left hand side image, where this
Mm.
lady's been filling the matka. Yeah. Also, there is no set in terms of the depth of it. Definitely because they clean the tank, okay, and access it. What happens is beyond 2 meters is something that people try and avoid. Yeah, because a person has to get into it and things like that. So 2.5 is something that generally people keep, but again, it all depends on the capacities. So depending on the capacity, you will have to do it, or you'll have to calculate it. There is no set
And
equation for it. That was
right.
for Naika. Yeah, Shravan. Then
Sorry, and Swati, you mentioned something about the water being potable because of the silt catcher.
Yeah. So this water they try and use for drinking water. At least that, I mean, initially it was being used for drinking water.
yeah, this was the only source of potable water for them.
So it's not like a
Even
regular rainwater harvesting where it's just used for flushing. You can actually use this, if not for
no,
drinking, then at
see,
least for hand washing purposes.
Shravan, that is in urban setup. What we are showing you is the traditional water systems when we didn't had a piped system. There was no taps or pipelines that would reach the house. The only source was a nearby well from where you draw the water, get it, you filter it using a very fine muslin cloth, then you heat it, and then you drink the same water. There was no other source of a different potable
Uh-huh.
water. The kind
But
of system that you're talking about is much more in an urbanized setup, wherein the pollution is so high and the dust and the particles and the contamination levels are also very higher. So
uh,
whatever that you harvest is not going to be a potable water.
not even for
First,
washing hands or anything.
no, no. Washing hands also not, because then you touch your nostrils, you have your
Mm-hmm.
hands all over your face and things like that. So in
Mm-hmm.
case there is a possibility of infection, then you need to treat that. And there were traditional ways of cleaning it, like adding alum to it and things like that, where the impurities start settling down. So those kinds of stuff are there, but this is actually a very pure, we are talking about a traditional water system here. This is the only source of rainwater harvesting and utilizing it for agriculture purposes and even for your living purposes, day-to-day living purposes.
Acha. But
Okay.
so you're saying, sorry, so in an urban context, unless I treat the water, which means I'll have to have a treatment facility either nearby or on site, I cannot use it for anything but flushing, right?
Yes, that is in an
Yes.
urbanized setup. Still in the rural
Ah,
setup, in my native place, I have a well. That same well water, we use it for everything. It's just that it's still being filtered with a fine sieve cloth and then heated. Boiling is the only way. So all these people used to boil the water like really hardly boil the water and then use it, so that you remove the entire infection and the possibilities of bacteria, everything, the moment you boil the water. So your dada dadis, nana nanis will always talk about, drinking boiled water and things like that. So that is the way to keep the uh, to ensure that the quality of water is good.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry if I took the
Yeah.
thing on a bit of a
Oh,
tangent.
yes. And Tanvi is requesting us to go a little slow because it's becoming difficult to take notes. Okay, Tanvi, we'll keep that in mind.
Oh,
Yeah. So should we move ahead, guys?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the third type we are looking at is basically a step well. I think most of us have seen one. And they're all of large, sometimes much larger in size, and sometimes they can be as small as, like, they can be a squared kind of cut out into the ground, and they can be few steps going down. But this is Rani Ki Vav in Patan, which is a very large step well, one that has been written about a lot also. But essentially, there is it's basically a subterranean structure. Everything around will be a retaining structure that you are creating to make sure that none of the land caves in. And essentially what you would have in most of these stepped kind of terrains is that you will create this kind of a circular well which will go down to the water table level. So every time there is there is an increase in the groundwater level as well, this water might rise up. And of course this also taps all the rainwater. So there is an exchange between your ground water level, groundwater, and what you store here, basically, because the bottom of the tank is open. So essentially what you have is all of this is steps, and they are this is a proper kind of structured edge, which is a solid edge to the bottom. And then here between below the tank is an open bottom, so that the water level can rise or fall based on whatever the condition at that point is. These were also built because the travelers during that time could kind of come and even stay here in the night, because this also reduces the temperature largely. One, because you have water towards the end collected, and the other thing is that it is a subterranean structure. You have large walls which are kind of reducing your temperature to a large extent. Even today, when you walk into an Adalaj in Ahmedabad, you do realize that it is much cooler below, and the temperature what it is outside doesn't really come in here. So it's a very interesting space in that sense. So yeah, these are some of the pictures of the Rani Ki Vav, and that's the circular well that you have towards the end. Sorry, I've I've just added this image. This is the Surya Kund in Delhi. Just added this image to to say that we don't always need to be developing such a deep well, depending on what the necessity is or what the design is. And now I'm talking in both contexts of today and what that must be that they were doing at that point. Basically, depending on how much water you want to hold, and depending on how much water actually exists in the overall water table, you will decide what the depth of this kund will be. So basically, you have your kind of retaining or solid structure all around, and then what the bottom is basically a open bottom, so that it will rise or fall based on your condition outside. Now, if this was a higher water table condition or a higher monsoon condition, then this probably would be much deeper, and depending on what your overflow level is, you would decide what the depth of this tank is. Actually, this is quite deep also. Yeah. Um, so yeah, so that's that. Then you have, this is the step well at Hampi. These are just iterations of the same idea. This is the step well at Modhera. Now, also, a lot of these are part of temple complexes, and that's why the ornamentalism kind of comes in, depending on where it's being built and for what. But essentially, the idea of it is the same. The concept of it is that it is a holding tank. It is an open tank. It is going to help you with providing water to the settlements close by, and then there are many other aspects to the architectural intervention in terms of how you want to kind of design it further. Um, so I think that's where we are at in the stepwell section. So we can probably discuss this part of it.
So it's again a similar question here, but minimum sizes for a step well would be how much?
I don't think there is a minimum size, but yeah, I mean, if because you're building it on all four sides, I think it'll have to be at least 10 meters comfortably for it to hold a good amount of if it's a square kind of step well, something around uh, 10 meters by 10 meters is possibly, but you can obviously be much smaller than that as well, depending on what you're building it for.
Yeah. It's actually also depending, sorry, Swati, but it's also depending on the village people that you're catering to, how much large the village is.
Hmm.
Okay, and also in terms of the springs, how many springs do you get in that particular area? So that entire stretch will be included because you then get so much of water because it has to sustain the whole year till the next monsoon occurs. So all these parameters play a very important role when you decide where to place it, how to place it, what is the sizing and things like that.
Right.
Okay, and the
Yeah,
steps are
sorry.
usually to access. So they will actually go very lot of floors below, so that as the water recedes after your usage and as you progress towards summers or the next monsoon, then you can access the bottommost level of the well, which is going to be in the rock formation, natural rock formation with springs on the from the sides. Yeah.
Sorry, Shravan, I was answering your question for like today, if you wanted to add a cone to what you are doing, then that would be it. But yeah, otherwise the parameters would be as Kinara mentioned. So I'm just clarifying the um,
Right. Right.
point of
Right.
where. But there is no particular size that one can just say it's dependent on all the parameters like she mentioned. Um, so should I go to the next part of it?
Uh, I had a doubt that
Yeah.
hello, hello.
Yes,
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 Sahil, we
we
can
can.
hear you. It's just that I'm in the staff room and everyone's taking a class,
Yes.
so you'll
No.
hear a
So
background noise.
I mean my doubt was that does a step well depend only on the surface runoff that is being stored, or it is dug deep enough so that the groundwater table also is stored in, I mean, can be accessed from the step well.
No, so it's actually like Kimaya explained. There are springs, and the groundwater is what you're digging for, basically. So you're going to go as low as where you get water. You're going to hit the level of the water table, so that you get the groundwater that can be used.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe it might be a possibility that in the monsoon, the top two rows are of the steps are only been visible. The rest are all been, filled
Hmm.
with water. Getting it, Sahil. So it all
Yes.
depends on how much rain you get that year and how much the population and the ground table is being increased.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the best part about these stepwells is that because they had open land and it's a natural system, no, that the rainwater percolates and it comes, and that's why there used to be water every time. Now, with urbanization and development, what has happened is that the obstruction of percolation has been much more higher, and because of which either they are drying up or they are having a very less water, and no more, and they are no more the sources, prime sources of water. Now, with the piped water supply, everyone is getting their water at home in their taps, so they are not bothered. And then the whole idea of the pollution, not maintaining it, and all those kinds of things occur. So till a stage wherein these the state of these tanks or stepwells in some of the cities or urban areas is so bad that now it has started affecting the groundwater contamination as well. So that's why then people have started taking interest in reviving them and looking at the traditional water systems, the kind of learnings that you can have from them, etc. Yes. Um, there's one question, Swati.
Yeah.
How do stepwells deal with water stagnation? So there is no water stagnation actually, because those springs do create a kind of a
Movement.
turbulences, yeah, momentum. It's not a turbulence, but it's a momentum, as Swati rightly said. The other thing is you'll always have tadpoles, you'll have frogs, you'll have sometimes fishes. So they try. So it's more like an ecology based kind of a system. It's only to retain water and give access. You're using a masonry, but again, it's a natural form of stone which is used, right? So there is nothing as an alien material as such. Everything is very natural, and then nature finds its own way to thrive. So it's never stagnant.
So actually, if you visit the Banganga tank here in Bombay, you'd always see that there are these bubbles, coming through in the water, and that's because there's either like some spring that is, allowing that to happen, or there are a lot of these frogs and things like that, which are always allowing the water movement to go on. So you'd always see that most of these steppers have some of the other movement every time you're kind of around it at any time in the day. Should we move ahead?
Yes, Swati.
Okay. So what we are looking at as a case study here is the Jahaz Mahal in Mandu, in Madhya Pradesh. Basically, this kind of touches upon the complex, touches upon various of these tanks and stepwells that we have looked at, and it kind of very interestingly uses all these methods together. Mandu, interestingly, is also a monsoon landscape. Essentially, doesn't have any groundwater source. It depends completely on rainwater, and that's why all the structures that were built back then kind of have these series of tanks or water bodies that have been created to allow for usage in that particular complex and very well. And they're very large, very interesting designed tanks which kind of come together, and the whole water system works beautifully. Um, a lot of it you can see if you kind of go to Mandu in the monsoon. During the monsoon or towards the receding monsoon, you'll see that all the wells are thriving. But a lot of the tanks are not functioning anymore, of course. But some of them are alive and kind of working in that sense. So yeah, so basically what we're looking at is the Jahaz Mahal. The Jahaz Mahal is called, Jahaz Mahal because it was kind of built also to celebrate the whole monsoon landscape. So essentially, Jahaz as in ship. So if you kind of went in during the monsoon time, you will see that this structure is almost seeming like floating because of the water that it has been collecting all around it. So there are various catchments that have been created. This is basically the entrance point from where you enter the complex, and then towards the left you see this Suraj Talab, and you walk down to see the main building. I think that's where the king kind of stayed, and has it also has a series of pools. Sorry, my pointer is moving. Yeah, so it has a series of pools which are kind of just as this luxurious kind of bath that is included. There is the Kapoor tank towards the right, which is to the east. Then there is the Munja tank to the left. It's not essentially a tank, it's basically um, to collect the monsoon rainwater and to celebrate it. It's not essentially something that is being supplied to the structure as such for any use. um, then then you have your Ujala Bauli and Andheri Bauli. They are also used for certain requirements. I will touch upon that a little later. And then you have a hammam here and the Champa Bauli, which is kind of creating this summer palace around it. And I'll come to that aspect as well later. So the two pools that I was talking about is this lotus shaped pool on the first floor, and then there is a ground floor kind of turquoise pool. Both of them are just um, added um, for the king to use in a summer situation. So basically, yeah, so this is basically your entrance way. This is what takes you down to the other structures as well. And this is the Suraj Talab that I just showed you in plan. This is where that Munja tank is at the back, and towards the right is where your Kapoor tank falls. This is the main structure, which is the Jahaz Mahal. So yeah, so that's the view of the Kapoor tank. Essentially, the Kapoor tank is what is one that supplies water to the structures as well. One thing that I missed telling you all is that yeah, actually the Suraj Talab, if you kind of go towards the receding monsoon time, it's filled, up to a very high level, and then this water collected here is
There
kind
is
of
a
then
lag. I don't know whether others are.
okay. I'll just go slower.
Swati, I think you'll have to repeat.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
go slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a
Okay.
second. So shall I repeat this slide as well?
Mm, this is fine when you're discussing the Kapoor tank.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So basically, this Kapoor tank is something that uh, provides water to the main structure as well. Um, just going back to the first slide, I just wanted to say that this Suraj Talab is something that is connected through aqueducts into and takes the water into these two pools. So essentially, they are filled through this talab, um, and that's how the whole pool is maintained. Even I mean, I think at that point would probably be filled even across the year whenever required. Um, yeah, so then coming back to the Kapoor tank, yeah. So the Kapoor tank is then what's happening is that this is to the east as I showed you in plan, and the Munja tank is to the left. Now, interestingly enough, there is a connection between the two. So basically, this portion I'll just show you in the next image is the channel which is connected at a lower level, and whenever the water rises here is kind of taken to the Munja side of it. So um, the water here is being used and stored, etc. But that side is the monsoon landscape, and that's when it rises. If the water levels here increase, then that level will rise. If one has to understand, just a second, I'm just trying to see if there's a better image. Um, Yeah, so basically, just to explain it, there is a level difference. Basically, this tank, your Kapoor tank, is the bottom is much lower, so the capacity of it is to hold to hold water is much higher, and your Munja side of it is actually just this. It's just a the natural ground level kind of landscape, and um, the level of the ground is much higher, so only the overflow of that side would then come into kind of this side. So the water levels would then match in a high monsoon condition whenever there is excess water on that side. um, so these are a few images. I just added the summer and the monsoon. Actually, when I visited it, this is how it was. It was thriving and there was water filled on either side. And this is the summer landscape, so you see no water here. And in the monsoon, this is around end of August. You see that it's thriving and it's completely plush and green. Um, these are some of the other tanks, which is towards the Jal Mahal. They are full, and this is what it is in the summer at this point. Yeah, so you can just see this lush, like completely green landscape. And there are, yeah, I mean, a lot of things like these are water spouts, etc., that have been that were there, which are now broken, which kind of then were taken into all these tanks. There are many pools that you see across, which I'll kind of touch upon a little later. There are these channels which are, these are the spouts which are taking the water down. So this is the pool that I was talking about earlier, which is at at the ground level, and there was one at the first floor. This is essentially used as a pool or a bath, and there are these water channels that you see in the ground that are taking the water into the pool. Basically, I think it's also, I mean, just as somebody who would probably question it or think about it and try to weave the narrative, it's possibly also just allowing to slow down the water and trickle into the in the hammam or the bath, not the hammam, sorry. When the king is there or sitting there, it doesn't kind of have a gush of water. It's just slowing down the whole process of how the water enters this pool. So those are some interesting details one notices when you're there. This is the other pool that you have on the first floor. Again, the same kind of channel you'll see entering the pool. Then we spoke about the Baolis. Now there is a Champa Baoli, like I showed you on plan, and I said that that was the summer palace. Basically, there are a lot of these rooms around it. Okay, and this is much deeper. So what happens is that in the summertime, because of the water being held here, this is allowing for the surrounding areas to be very cool, and that's when everybody from the main building would probably come in and stay here, because the temperature is maintained, and it's it kind of allows for one to be very comfortable during the summertime. So it kind of tells you about how a lot of these water systems can be used through the year in a different way as well, also for your living conditions. This is actually
Swati,
the
can I add something here
yes,
just
yes,
before you move ahead? So
yes.
regarding the how these Baulis were used to cool the rooms, see it is also on the working on the principles of directive evaporative cooling. You also have to understand the humidity levels are lesser during the summers especially, because of which the evapotranspiration rate hikes up, and because of which it will always add humidity. The water will always have humidity, so you directly expose the water to the outdoor atmosphere so that it acquires that humidity and drops the temperature, and that's how it's cooler. The other second thing is about the material, the stone.
Hmm.
Now, what happens with stone is it will take time to heat, okay, and it also take time to release that heat over a period of time. So it works very well in winters as well as in summers. It will be cooler for a longer time. Yeah, yeah, Swati.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish that because it's quite an interesting thing that how they used to use water to also, as a passive design technique for their buildings.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
this one is
Okay.
sorry.
Mm,
Can I, you want to add something? I mean, you want to go ahead?
no, I'm just saying we have finished the class 20.
Oh,
Uh,
I didn't
but
realize.
if you want to just finish Mandu and then we can take it in the next class,
Yeah,
we
I
could do
think
that.
these are just a few. Yeah, these are the two Baulis that are left, and we just
It's
have.
2:20 already, didn't realize. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I didn't realize it. So these are just
yes.
two.
So let's finish Mandu now. We'll just
Yeah,
little.
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, this Ujala Baoli is basically is called Ujala because it's open, and this is what allows for the water to be carried to the is the portable water carrier, and then you have the series of steps which will allow you to kind of come down to the water level, whatever it may be. It will rise and fall depending on what the situation and the condition is. And so this one is basically being used for portable water. This is like a watchtower. At that point, whoever the guard was would probably be watching and seeing that there's everything's being taken care of correctly. This was the last one, which is the Andheri Baoli. It's also called that because it's something which is a closed tank. It's not an open tank. And that is one that allows for the water to be taken to the hammams and the baths. And it has a series of kind of arcades around it, but essentially it's a circular tank which is kind of taking your water to the hammams and the baths. So yeah, so that's, I think, that's that. But it's Yamandu as such is a very, very interesting place to understand various water systems. This is just one of them. um yeah, but that's that. This is, yeah, I mean, I just want to end at this. Basically, where your water is being held, that's your main building. And when this water level rises, that's why it's called Jahaz Mahal. You hardly kind of see that edge. It completely diminishes, and that's when you see that that whole structure is almost floating. So it's a celebration of the water, it's a celebration of the monsoon landscape, and that's where the king with his wives would stay during the monsoon time. So that's that. I think, yeah, that's we're at the end of the presentation, Kim. If there's anything to be added.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Any questions?
Kim, I have one regarding a dry toilet. Should I ask you now or should I send it to you on chat later?
You can send it to me on chat because I realize I think even Ambika has sent us something. We'll be just
Uh-huh.
going through it. So you could, if it's regarding your ideas, then send it on a chat.
Okay, I'll send it to
Anything
you on
regarding
chat.
the presentation, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because you guys have to go for the structures.
Yeah.
Not
So basically, like when we're
so
talking about these,
yeah.
this is about the presentation. So when we're talking about all these designs, the idea
Hmm.
wasn't just to store the water for later, but at least in the later in this one, it also has like a secondary use. Like with the Baoli, you said it had a cooling effect on the climate. That's why it wasn't like closed up like the Tunky, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So Jahaz Mahal is a very peculiar example where they really celebrate water. Water being the, one of the prime source of life, and everything revolves around water, right? Without water, we can't imagine life on Earth. And the way these structures were held, and if you look at the setup of Mandu in terms of the topography and everything, even in terms of climate, Jahaz where it, and you know how when Swati was explaining the Manju tank, then the Kapoor tank, and these things, that it's very well planned. That the whole year, especially seasonally, there was a role of each tank to be played. And even in monsoon, if there is a heavy monsoon, then that overflow will go onto the other side without flooding the entire site. So the everything was really thought of in terms of even uncertainties that can land up over the period of time. The kind of arrangements that you need to do to make sure that your water is adequate enough for the entire year. Okay. Then the whole idea of the Ujala Baudi, and there is, I think, Andheri Baudi as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, which is a very closed one, which will definitely be a resort for the summers. And it is Andheri because it's closed one. It's not an open one where the evaporation rate is going to be much more higher. So, so if you see, there are these smaller fundamental principles on which these huge kind of campuses are also being built, like Jahaz Mahal and things like that. So definitely, water was not only the source of drinking, but it along with it, if it can actually help in cooling the places and things like that, it was very wisely done. because at that time no one was dependent on technology. Everything was a very natural form, and you had to work with nature eventually to make sure that there is a thermal comfort and a visual comfort as well, like your daylight as well as your temperatures and humidity within the spaces that you live.
Right, right. And a tanki wouldn't serve a similar purpose where it would cool the environment because it was sealed off, right?
Yeah.
A tanki wouldn't be able to. Okay, yeah.
No, and also you also have to understand this is an example of how water gets integrated within the architecture part of it. So basically, if you look at it, it's quite like a machine. It's not running on a mechanical machine. It's running on the understanding of gravity. That's why the levels of the tanks, understanding of how people are moving through. So the whole architecture itself celebrates that water, and water becomes like this fluid that's going through that entire system. So it's and the jar smell, actually, if you imagine, it's more like this kind of a machine which will always ensure there is water, you know, for the people who are staying in and around that area.
All right, all right. Thank you.
Swati, anything? Well,
Sorry, Kim, I couldn't get that.
no, I was just asking anything else we need to mention.
Uh, no, that's it from
Oh,
my
okay, fine.